What do a hit Netflix animated series, a dying NASA scientist, and early analog horror have in common? Well, to answer that question, I'm going to introduce you to one of the first YouTube pages I ever stumbled upon that could be considered analog horror. I'm talking, of course, about NASA Gym 108. Now, some of you may already be familiar, but if you're not, allow me first to set the stage. Way back in 20-some-odd-10, I was a community college dropout, working construction, and doing everything in my power to smoke the brains completely out of my head. I was watching time evaporate as I consumed the quality content of the day, such as Ancient Aliens, Zeitgeist, Loose Change, and Out of the Blue. See, back then, conspiracies were still fun and motivating, instead of racist and preposterous, as they are today. So in the midst of all this, the NASA Gym 108 channel fell into my lap. To explain it briefly, this was a channel with, at the time, 13 videos, each one supposedly made by a NASA scientist who was terminally ill and released posthumously by his attorney. The contents of these 13 videos, currently 15, but we will get into that later, detail the communication and cooperation between NASA and an alien race. Howdy. My name is P. Paul Hefty, and I want to welcome you to the Obscure Curio. Now, I'm new to videos like this, but if you like it, I invite you to check out my other content over on my page, and if you like those, to consider subscribing to the channel. We sure would appreciate it. Anyway, I wish I could tell you that when I discovered these videos, I knew better than to believe anything they contained, but in good faith, I cannot. 20-year-old stoner me was obsessed with these videos. I watched them multiple times, showed them to friends, and spent an illegitimate span of time contemplating the implications of this massive piece of information. Simply, I was a mark. But enough about me. Let's get into the videos themselves and we can talk about them some more. Now, I want to get into these with an open mind. First, watching them as if afresh and anew to fully appreciate the content before then diving into the larger picture and ultimately revealing what I reckon was going on here. The first video on the channel is titled simply, Dying NASA Scientist Reveals Truth About Life on Mars.
My name is Jim. I was an aeronautic research engineer at NASA from 1989 to 2000.
It starts off with the audio of a man calling himself Jim, as is the moniker of the channel. He says that he was an aeronautic research engineer at NASA from 1989 to 2004. He further explains that he was recently diagnosed with bone cancer and given 5 months to live. This is our setup for why this person should be listened to and why they are choosing to give this information. Jim doesn't want to die having kept what he considers a massive secret. Throughout the 3.5-minute video, Jim hits some classic conspiracy points before tying them into his own story. He mentions the Illuminati and their control of all society, before going on to reveal that there is a subterranean species of extraterrestrials living underground on Mars. These beings, he claims, are the aliens widely known as the Greys, and that they have been in communication with Earth leaders for many years. He also says this:
They don't have the same kind of human empathy that we're accustomed to, and they really don't feel that it's wrong to kill.
And explains that this species sees living bodies merely as a container for a universal spirit, and have no qualms about releasing the spirit from its container. Jim saw the Greys kill humans while the government did nothing about it for fear of losing access to their technology. Jim offers a picture and an article of a man supposedly killed by the aliens, and images of what he claims are an ancient city on the surface of Mars, before coughing and stating that he doesn't have the energy for a longer video. So right off the bat, we're given the meat and potatoes of any good conspiracy theory. We have this credible individual, a NASA scientist, who, on his deathbed, reveals that our government has been working with aliens in exchange for technology. What a whirlwind, honestly. And that alone is enough to make you either walk away or crave more. However, this is only the tip of the iceberg. Videos 2, 3, and 4 are titled Dying NASA Scientist Reveals Truth About Life on Mars, numbers 2, 3, and 4, respectively. They expand upon this story in an interesting, if unorganized way. In video 2, we are told that these aliens can transmute, and shown this image, which points to a cluster of negative thought forms known as a psych nest. Yes. This image states, aliens exist in ideas. They can travel through language. Some negative thought forms that you currently have may be a parasitic form of interdimensional life. And many major television stations transfer these beings by encoding programs with specific frequencies through which the aliens can travel. Jim then plays us a recording of one of these beings transmuting into a sound wave, and it sounds like this. Now, these videos are all pretty short, so I'm going to also explain 3 and 4 before we talk about them further. Video 3 begins with Jim apologizing for being a bit off, as he is on a combination of his prescription pain medicine and a glass of wine. And to be fair, this is the exact type of stuff I talk about when I'm off my gourd on black beauties and red fruities, but let's be serious. In the context of this channel, video 3 is Jim lamenting his situation and wondering aloud why he should pass so slowly when he knows he could get it over with so much quicker. However, he then wonders if death is the escape we think it is, and says they might be there too. He ends the video by speaking out to an unknown person, if they are indeed
And if you're out there and you hear this, you just go. You just go. I don't know if anywhere is safe, but you were right. I think you were right, and you don't try to find me because I'm gonna do what we talked about it in.
Video 4 is this thing, which is apparently a device invented by a scientist who worked closely with the Greys. This thing will supposedly open up your subconscious and allow you to be visited in your dreams by interdimensional beings. That sounds kind of terrifying, to be honest. Let's watch.
And aliens, interdimensional beings, extraterrestrials, or anything of that nature.
Yeah, I hate that. Luckily, Jim explains that this will work, whether or not we believe in aliens or the other things mentioned, and that it doesn't matter if we think we aren't open to suggestibility. You will have the dream anyway. Well, that's just neat. So, what is the story so far? Jim is a dying NASA scientist revealing the truth about aliens. These aliens apparently come from Mars, but are also interdimensional in some way, and able to turn themselves into other things, even sound waves. The aliens are in contact with humans in some sort of agreement to give them technology in return for something not specified. The aliens, I guess, aren't being portrayed as evil, just without empathy and emotion, and therefore unremorseful if they kill a human, which they apparently do at their own discretion. When I first watched this in 2010, I won't lie, I was freaked out by this point, and I was the exact audience for this sort of thing, and I found it equally mesmerizing and terrifying. I definitely had a nightmare about aliens that night, but to be fair, and you may have heard me mention this before if you've been on this channel, I have had reoccurring nightmares about aliens my whole life. But I reckon that's just sort of what happens when you watch stuff like this for entertainment growing up. Anyway, video 5, this one just called Dying NASA Scientist Reveals Truth About Life on Mars Again, breaks from Jim's narrated videos to play this.
Be considered private and possibly damaging to their reputations. If the judge rules otherwise, then
What we are hearing instead is the voice of the apparent attorney of Jim, the one tasked with releasing these videos after his death. If you look to the About section on the YouTube page, you can see that it reads, "These are a series of videos that my client requested to be released after his death, furthering the narrative that Jim has already died at the release of these videos." The law office named on screen during the video, Lorber and Jacob, apparently does not exist. At least, I couldn't find anything about them online. It would appear that this is a false name used to preserve identity, which, as the video goes on to say, is exactly what this scientist did with the name Jim. I do want to point out here that while looking into these videos, both 12 years ago and here recently, I found a handful of people pointing to a real NASA employee named Jim that died a year or two before these videos were released. However, I think it's clearly implied in video 5 that Jim is a false name. Even though that kind of messes with the story later on, that's still the implication I'm getting. But another interesting thing I found was a connection between the law office's fake name, Lorber and Jacob, and a Christian mystic named Jacob Lorber. Lorber, interestingly enough, also had a revealing bit of information published on his behalf after his death in the form of a large theological manuscript. Video 5 reveals that the family of Jim wants the lawyer to quit releasing the videos, which the lawyer says they will not do per Jim's request. And just real quickly, does the voice of the lawyer sound familiar at all?
I will immediately resume the upload of materials as
Or perhaps even Jim's voice, because that's going to come up later. Video 6 is titled Dying NASA Scientist Talks About Alien Life, which I feel like is a nice change of pace. Let me tell you right now though, the scene doesn't get any prettier. In this video, Jim is back to explain that his cancer was not an accident. His cancer, and the cancers of many other government employees, he says, were a direct punishment for dissent from the establishment. This is where we get the picture that the government knew Jim was likely to reveal these secrets and decided to take him out before he could do so. It doesn't seem like that worked though, considering that these videos exist, but whatever. Video 7, titled Dying NASA Scientist Shows Footage of an Alien, is a real banger, because this one shows footage of an alien. Basically, Jim explains that a convict on death row for murder had this alien living in his brain, and that using psycho-spiritual energy imaging, psycho-spiritual energy, we can see it. If you're even still watching this, I'm going to assume you're with me at this point and just plow through. This technique was invented by Nikola Tesla, and it allows us to see the parasitic aliens that live in people's brains. This is what one of these little fellas look like. I gotta say too, I don't much care for this idea. Gave me the creeps then, gives me the creeps now, don't care for it. Video 8, dying NASA scientist shows how to contact beings, kicks it up a notch for obvious reasons. It starts with this warning, flashes to this ominous quote, and then chucks a sigil on the screen for good measure. Jim explains in simpler terms that certain images and sounds combined with your dumb brain will open up your psyche to communication with alien beings. Again, I want to emphasize here that I lost my marbs to these videos back in the day, and this one in particular, combined with enough tweed to paralyze a pro wrestler, had me convinced I was about to speak to aliens at any point.
To the shapes on the screen.
You can even go try the full shebang over on their page if you're so inclined. Video 9 is called Dying NASA Scientist, shows audio/video of an alien transmission. Jim quickly explains that once we started tuning in to the subatomic frequencies, we began to receive transmissions from the aliens. This was the first one. He also says that we got better at decoding them over time, whatever that means. Video 10 is another change-up, titled Dying NASA Scientist Being Threatened by Outside Forces. We're listening in on an apparent voicemail left to Jim by some unknown individual who angrily tells Jim to leave it alone. We can only assume this is in reference to Jim preparing to release this information. He implies that he can make Jim's cancer worse before the voicemail ends and this song picks up.
You don't scare us, we're the children of the dawn.
Now, if you're privy to anything I'm talking about in this video, or is mentioned in the title, you might already see where I'm going with this. But remember, we're watching them as I did in 2010, so we gotta turn our brains off, and in trying to suspend disbelief, and being as we're almost done, I'm gonna hold off for now. Video 11, titled Dying NASA Scientist on the Alien Origin of Materialism, is a bizarre deviation from the videos past. Whereas those were narrations over short videos and images, this one comes equipped with an introduction from a puppet. Look. We then see a random assortment of odd video and audio before going back to narration over short videos and images. Jim explains that Earth is afflicted with a cosmic plague, the symptoms of which are extreme materialism. Earth is in the final stage of this plague, and to heal the ill and save the planet, our government has developed a treatment for those most adversely affected: death. Yeah, pretty dark stuff, isn't it? Video 12, Dying NASA Scientist describes the mothership, establishes a wild bit of new lore for the NASA Jim story. Jim tells us that we are not actually on planet Earth, living our human lives as we think. We are instead much older beings from an Earth that no longer exists. We escaped the crumbling planet long ago on what he calls a holographic ship, and have been asleep in a sort of cryogenic hibernation as we travel to some long-awaited destination in space. During this journey that would take centuries, we were placed in a sort of matrix where we are experiencing our current lives. The purpose of this, other than staying sane in space for hundreds of years, was to weed out people who were apparently afflicted with these alien parasites living in their brain. Those who could not purge the beings before humanity arrived at its new planet would not be allowed to join their brethren on the new soil. I know this is a lot to unpack, but there's only 3 videos left, so pull up on those reins. Video 13 is called Dying NASA Scientist Shows How to Neutralize an Alien, and given the implications of the other videos, it contains some crucial information. Namely, someone dressed as a Baphomet, seemingly torturing a woman, and holding up this fan. Now, when I first watched this, I dove into this fan. I looked up the dates and numbers and all that. Unfortunately, I can't remember a whole lot of what I found, but I do remember looking up the names and finding these 4 people of interest. David Kelly was a scientist and expert on biological warfare who mysteriously stopped living 2 days before being slated to speak on Iraq's supposed WMDs. The most likely Stephen Mostow I found was Dr. Stephen R. Mostow, who was an expert on the flu and died in a freak plane crash. The only interesting Ian Langford I found was some sort of Australian special operations guy, and Robert Shope, you might have guessed, was a virologist, epidemiologist, and public health expert. When I tell you that 2010 me found the conspiracy motherlode with this one, I am being genuine. This was before COVID too. I can only imagine what my little stoner brain would have thought if I watched that now. Unfortunately, Jim doesn't actually tell us how to neutralize the alien. We are given this though, coordinates 38, 7, 33.64, and negative 122, 11, 22.57, which is this mining site in California with some gigantic pit. Pretty interesting. We're also given the Bible verses, Psalm 38:7, which reads, "For my loins are filled with a loathsome disease, and there is no soundness in my flesh." And Luke 22:57, which reads, "But he denied it. 'Woman, I don't know him,' he said." This is in reference to Peter denying Jesus 3 times before the rooster crowed. Alright, so when I first watched these videos, these 13 were the only ones released at that time. So that's where it ended. I had this huge revelation at my fingertips. Chock full of aliens, interdimensional beings, time travel, simulations, Jesus, demons, plagues, and nowhere to go with it. I know all of these components seem pretty commonplace now, but back then I can assure you, these weren't necessarily uncommon insights, but they definitely weren't anywhere near as prevalent as they are today. I got obsessed with these videos, told everyone about the truth in them, and I am telling you, I was a real hassle to be around there for a while. Finally, after radio silence for 2 years, the channel released another video. This one was called Alien Tuning Fork. Jim is back to tell us that you can tune into and listen to human consciousness by playing a certain frequency that sounds like this. That's the whole video. Our dude, or dude's lawyer we would presume, dipped for 2 years just to come back with the worst EDM track I've ever heard. Now officially, this is where it ended for me. I quit being so paranoid and weird all the time, mostly, and got over my obsession with conspiracies and aliens, mostly. These videos were still there in the back of my mind here and there, but I didn't really think about them unless something relevant came up. I obviously stopped believing in the validity of these videos eventually, but who cares? Last year, in 2021, my interest was rekindled, this time for a different reason. I've struggled to find the exact clip since, but I was watching an interview with comedian Duncan Trussell. Some of you may know Duncan from his podcast, Duncan Trussell Family Hour, which is one of my favorites and how I became a fan, or perhaps from his hit Netflix animated series featuring audio from that very same podcast, The Midnight Gospel. If I remember correctly, in an interview with Whitney Cummings, Duncan is suddenly asked by Whitney about the channel NASA Gem 108, and his involvement, to which he sloppily and hastily changes the subject. I wish I could find the exact clip, because when I saw it, my mind was blown. At that point, I had been a fan of Trussell's for 3 or 4 years. Was it possible he had had a hand in creating the conspiracy videos I had enjoyed a decade prior? Well, after rewatching the videos, that is what I concluded. There are many instances, particularly this song,
You don't scare us, you don't scare us, we're the children of the dawn.
which are a dead giveaway for Duncan's voice.
Ear beating about what mushrooms are and what she can expect. And
It has since been noted that the attorney's voice, as heard here,
And I will immediately resume the upload of materials as
is eerily similar to that of fellow comedian Natasha Leggero, but that's just speculation. As fans of Trussell's might note, he has a fondness toward Moog synthesizers, which can produce many of the tones heard throughout the videos, such as these. Despite being enamored with these videos in my early 20s, a contemporary viewing made it obvious that NASA Gem 108 was not the product of a dying scientist with massive secrets and his loyal attorney. It was the product of a comedian, psychonaut, and perhaps some of his friends. That, for most, would be the end of the mystery. For me, though, not quite. I cannot find anything online with Duncan or anyone else claiming ownership of this channel. Even the original clip that sparked my interest eludes me now. NASA Gem is mentioned frequently in compilations of mysterious and creepy YouTube channels, and there have been 1 or 2 videos in the past to point out the possible connection between Trussell and the channel, but no acknowledgement from Duncan himself. Again, fans of Duncan Trussell are probably familiar with his eccentricities. A spiritually minded, hallucinogenic consuming, artistic creator as he is, this content might seem commonplace among his other ventures, but to me, it still seems just a hair strange. It's clear today that this channel is an early to YouTube analog horror of sorts, so why not claim ownership? Why try to pass it off as real in the first place? Maybe one day, Duncan will speak on it. Oh yeah, there was one more video posted 5 years ago and 5 years after the previous video. It is titled Omega Phase. The video is of a clock slowly morphing into a picture of Jesus and accompanied by, if you can believe it, synth music. Whatever the larger message behind these videos is, it's lost on me. But I hope you had fun. If you enjoyed yourself, check out my other stuff and consider subscribing. Real quick, I want to do the first official shout out to our Patreon patrons. Shout out to Essex, Sassy, Justin, Motts, Ace, Russell, Haley, Libra, Raj, Somesense, Christopher, and Kristen. Thank you so much. Bye then. Love ya.